Welcome in, everyone, to another deep dive into U.S. politics. And this time you guys have sent us some pretty interesting clips
Yeah.
from some congressional hearings and some news sources.
Yeah, this is a wild one.
Things are getting pretty spicy. We're going to focus today on this thing everybody's calling the Doge Subcommittee.
Right.
It seems like maybe it's just about cryptocurrency, but I have a feeling there's something a little bigger at play here.
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of both.
Okay.
I mean, the subcommittee is led by Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Right.
and they could very well be trying to position themselves as tech savvy.
Okay.
Being in touch with a younger demographic that's very interested in crypto. But at the same time, it also gives them a platform to scrutinize a sector that's often seen as very disruptive and challenging to traditional financial systems.
Yeah, and we can't forget about the Democratic response.
Hmm.
They are not mincing words.
Not at all.
Especially Representative Garcia.
Yeah.
She brought out a rather interesting visual aid
Yes, she did.
during her remarks.
Yeah, I think Congresswoman Garcia using that photo of Elon Musk during her statement was definitely calculated.
Yeah.
I mean, it directly ties Musk to the Republican Party, and especially figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's been a vocal supporter of both Musk and Dogecoin. So this could be an attempt to raise concerns about potential conflicts of interest,
Right.
and to frame the hearings as being driven by personal allegiances more than legitimate policy concerns.
Well, and Garcia is not the only Democrat on this subcommittee that's ready to push back.
Nope.
We've got Crockett, Swalwell, and Goldman, all known for their strong stances. It seems like the Democrats are coming in ready for a fight.
Oh, absolutely. They've put some of their most articulate and assertive members on the subcommittee, which really suggests that they anticipate the hearings to become a battleground for much broader ideological and political conflicts.
Yeah, speaking of battlegrounds, Representative Crockett did not hold back when she was voicing her concerns about Elon Musk's influence in the Oval Office.
Yeah,
She even mentioned seeing him, occupying the Oval Office.
yeah,
What are the implications here of somebody who is not elected
right.
having this level of access and influence?
Well, it's a really important point, I think, that she raises.
Yeah.
The fact that unelected individuals, and particularly, those with significant wealth and influence, are able to potentially exert quite a lot of sway over government decisions raises a lot of questions about transparency and accountability. Do citizens have enough insight into these relationships?
Right.
And are there mechanisms in place to ensure that this influence isn't undermining the democratic process?
And adding to that, Representative Jacobs pointed out what seems like a contradiction in the Republican stance. They often criticize unelected bureaucrats
Yes.
that seem very comfortable with Musk's level of influence.
It's true.
So what's going on there?
Well, I think Jacob's comment really highlights a potential shift in Republican priorities.
Okay.
It suggests a growing acceptance of the role of these tech billionaires in
Oh.
shaping political discourse and policy. And it begs the question, is this like a pragmatic embrace of a changing world?
Right.
Or is it a more concerning sign of a shift in power dynamics that really favors a select few?
Let's step outside of the Doge subcommittee for a moment and talk about Congressman Raskin. He condemned Trump's lawsuit against CBS for an interview that they did with Kamala Harris.
Right?
He contrasted this with what seems like favorable treatment of Fox News.
Yeah.
So what does all this tell us about the media landscape right now?
Well, Raskin's statement really brings to light this concerning issue of potential media bias
Yeah.
and using these lawsuits to try to silence critical voices. And the situation raises a lot of questions about press freedom in the U.S.
Right.
Is there a real effort being made to make sure there's balanced reporting, or are certain media outlets being favored or pressured to align with specific political agendas? And if Trump's lawsuit ends up being successful, it could set a pretty chilling precedent for journalists and media organizations that are critical of those in power.
Well, and the Democrats are definitely not shying away from confrontation. We have clips here of Swalwell directly criticizing the GOP's inaction on lowering costs, and Crockett straight up accusing Musk of spreading lies about the funding for conflicts in Gaza.
Wow.
Is this like a new strategy for the Democrats?
It could be.
This more aggressive approach?
It's possible that this more assertive communication style is a direct response to the success of Trump's own very confrontational tactics. It suggests that the Democrats might be realizing that they need to kind of fight fire with fire in this current political climate.
Right.
But it also carries risks. Does this approach risk alienating more moderate voters?
Right.
Is there a danger of sort of mirroring the very tactics that they criticize in the opposition?
Yeah.
It's a tough line to walk.
Now let's get to the heart of this political battle. It's the money. The proposed MAGA budget, we're hearing a lot about significant tax cuts for billionaires,
Right.
alongside potential cuts to very essential social programs like Medicaid. Representative Goldman even criticized his Republican colleagues, suggesting that they're really undermining their own constitutional authority just to appease Trump and Musk.
Yeah.
Can you unpack this a little for us? What are the implications of these budgetary decisions?
Yeah, Goldman's criticism, I think, really underscores how much of an impact budget proposals can have on people's lives. This MAGA budget seems to reflect this prioritization of supply-side economics, favoring tax cuts for the wealthy, with this idea that it's going to stimulate economic growth that benefits everybody.
Right.
But critics argue that it usually just makes income inequality worse.
Yeah.
And cutting programs like Medicaid could leave millions of vulnerable Americans without access to essential health care services.
Right.
So these choices about the budget really raise a crucial question. Do they represent a real attempt to address economic challenges, or are they primarily designed to consolidate power and wealth within a very specific group?
Okay, and now there's this really fascinating twist. Ryan Grimm is reporting that Tesla is about to get a massive State Department contract for armored vehicles.
Oh, wow.
And this seems like a pretty significant change from when Trump used to mock the idea of electric vehicles in the military.
Yeah.
What do you make of this?
Well, I think it brings up a couple of interesting points. First of all, it highlights how unpredictable political alliances can be and how quickly stances can shift when new opportunities arise. So, Trump, who once dismissed electric vehicles, might now find himself supporting a policy that benefits a company that is super closely associated with one of his biggest supporters, Elon Musk.
Right.
It's a good reminder that business interests and political maneuvering are often very closely linked.
Yeah.
But it also suggests this growing recognition that electric vehicles are viable.
Right.
Even in sectors like defense that have always relied heavily on gas.
Right.
So is this a real shift in thinking, or is it just political convenience?
Well, and while Tesla's looking at these big government contracts, there are reports that NOAA is facing budget cuts and a hiring freeze, which could have a serious impact on the U.S. Weather Service.
Oh, wow.
This seems like a very strange contrast, especially with all the attention that's being given to things like condom distribution in Gaza.
Yeah.
So what's going on here?
Well, it raises concerns about how we're deciding our national priorities. Underfunding essential services like the Weather Service, which is crucial for public safety and disaster preparedness, could have really serious consequences for millions of Americans.
Right.
Focusing on what some people might consider less critical issues, like that condom distribution in Gaza, could be a way to distract people, take attention away from more important domestic concerns.
Yeah.
So I think this underscores how important it is to think critically and to try to figure out what are genuine government priorities and what are these manufactured controversies designed to influence how the public thinks.
Well, and then to add to this already tense atmosphere, there's this very unsettling report that MAGA representatives were openly mocking a blind witness who was testifying before Congress.
Wow, that's awful.
What kind of message does this send about the state of our political discourse?
Well, this incident is deeply concerning.
Yeah.
Mocking a witness with a disability is not only insensitive, but it really speaks to this larger erosion of decorum and respect within the U.S. government.
Yeah.
It raises questions about their commitment to inclusivity and their ability to just have a reasoned debate. This kind of behavior undermines how seriously we take these proceedings.
Right.
And it just erodes public trust in the government. It makes you wonder, is this an isolated incident, or is it a sign of a much bigger decline in civility and respect within American politics?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From Dogecoin to budgetary showdowns and this just unsettling behavior in Congress. What stands out to you the most from all of this?
I think what's most striking is this apparent shift in how the Democrats are approaching things. They're pushing back harder, using much bolder language and engaging much more directly. And it suggests they're realizing that the old rules of politics may not work anymore in this really highly charged environment.
Yeah.
But will it be effective?
Right.
Will this be enough to counter the MAGA agenda and these powerful backers? Or will it just make the tension worse and deepen the political divide? That's something we really need to think carefully about as we continue to look at all of this.
That's a great point. We're going to continue to unpack this evolving political landscape in just a moment. But first,
I think it's also important to remember that all these events we've been talking about,
Yeah.
the Doge Subcommittee, this proposed mega budget and the influence of people like Elon Musk, it's all connected. It really reflects this much deeper shift that's happening in the dynamics of power and wealth and technology in American society.
So it's not just about these isolated incidents. We're talking about like a real shift.
Yeah, potentially a paradigm shift.
In how American politics works.
Exactly. I think we're seeing this convergence of factors that could really reshape the political landscape for years to come. You know, the rise of cryptocurrency and this growing influence of these tech billionaires like Musk, coupled with these populist movements like this MAGA agenda, it's creating this sense of uncertainty and volatility in politics.
You mentioned the MAGA budget, and it seems to really favor tax cuts for billionaires while potentially cutting funding for really essential social programs, like Medicaid. Is this a sign of a bigger shift back to that trickle-down economics?
Yeah, it seems to echo some of those principles.
We saw in the 80s.
Exactly, with this emphasis on tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations. The people who support this argue that it will stimulate investment and create jobs, and that ultimately everyone will benefit. But critics are saying that it's just going to make income inequality even worse, and that it'll neglect the needs of people with lower incomes.
Yeah, I mean, cutting programs like Medicaid would leave so many people,
millions of people,
without any access to affordable health care.
Exactly. And then tax cuts for the wealthy, they might not actually boost economic growth at all.
So it's that same debate we've been having forever. Those who believe in the free market versus those who think we need more of a safety net and more equality. But how do these budgetary decisions connect to what we're seeing politically? Specifically, the MAGA movement and the influence of Elon Musk.
Well, that's where things get really interesting. This interplay of money and power and ideology. The MAGA movement gets a lot of its support from people who feel like they've been left behind by globalization and by technological change. They feel like they've lost economic opportunities and social status. So this MAGA budget, with its focus on tax cuts and deregulation, it can be seen as a way to appeal to these people by promising to bring back economic prosperity.
Okay, but where does Elon Musk fit into all of this? He's not a politician, but he has so much influence in the political sphere.
Well, he's this new kind of power player. He's this tech billionaire who can leverage his wealth and his technological power to shape public opinion and influence policy decisions.
He's good at it, too.
Oh, he is.
He's a master of social media.
Absolutely. He uses platforms like Twitter to promote his views.
To build this following.
And even to, like, sway markets.
And he has these close ties to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So is there this alliance forming?
Seems like it.
Between the tech world and the populace.
It's possible we're seeing the emergence of this whole new political axis where the traditional party lines are getting blurry and wealth and technological influence are becoming much more intertwined with political power.
Yeah, so this Doge subcommittee, it's this weird mix of memes and cryptocurrency and political maneuvering. It really is like this tiny example
a microcosm
of this much bigger trend.
It is. We're seeing this shift away from that traditional left-right political spectrum toward this much more complex landscape where technology and globalization and economic inequality are completely reshaping political allegiances.
Okay, we've talked about the Republicans and the MAGA agenda. What about the Democrats? How are they responding to all of this? We've seen them taking a more aggressive approach. People like Swalwell and Crockett directly challenging the GOP, and even Elon Musk. Is this a real change in their strategy?
It could be.
Or is it just a way to adapt to the current political climate?
It's possible that they're realizing they need to change their approach. The traditional Democratic way of focusing on policy details and reasoned arguments, it might not be enough.
Not in this world of sound bites and social media.
Exactly. Not in this media environment that's dominated by sound bites and social media and emotional appeals.
So this more confrontational style could be a way to try to get people's attention.
To break through the noise and really capture people's attention.
But could it backfire?
It could.
Could it alienate more moderate voters or just make the political divide even worse?
That's a valid concern.
It seems like a very tricky situation.
It is. They need to find this balance between defending their values forcefully and avoiding that really divisive rhetoric that fuels the MAGA movement. They need to offer people a clear vision for the future. One that really resonates with a lot of different voters. One that addresses the anxiety and the aspirations of the people who feel like they've been left behind by economic and technological change.
You mentioned how important it is to connect with the voters on an emotional level. And we've seen how things like the Doge Subcommittee or condom distribution in Gaza or even mocking a blind witness can distract people
Yeah.
from the real policy discussions.
hmm
Is this on purpose?
Mm.
Are they trying to manipulate how the public sees things?
I think it's probably both.
Okay.
You know, the media landscape is so fractured now.
Right.
With partisan news outlets and social media algorithms.
Yeah.
They're constantly feeding us information that just confirms what we already believe.
Right.
So it's no wonder that these sensationalized stories and emotional appeals get so much attention.
Right.
While the actual policy discussions get lost.
Right.
And politicians know how to use this.
Right.
They use these carefully crafted messages and distractions to shape public opinion and to advance their own agendas.
So it's up to us,
Yeah.
the informed citizens, to cut through all that noise
Exactly.
and to figure out what's a real debate and what's just manufactured controversy.
Right.
We need to hold our elected officials accountable.
Absolutely.
But with so much information coming at us from every direction,
Yeah.
how could we even make sense of it all?
Well, that's where critical thinking comes in.
Okay.
We have to develop these skills to evaluate sources and assess the credibility of claims and identify potential biases.
Okay.
We have to be aware of our own preconceptions
Right.
and be willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look for different perspectives and be able to talk to people we disagree with.
So you're saying we need a more informed and engaged citizenry?
Yeah.
One that can navigate this complex world of information and really participate in the democratic process. But is that even realistic?
It's a challenge for sure.
I mean, people seem more interested in entertainment these days
Yeah.
than in, like, thoughtful analysis and civic engagement.
It is a challenge,
Yeah.
but it's an essential one. The future of our democracy depends on it.
Okay.
We need to cultivate this culture of critical thinking and civil discourse and active participation in politics.
So how do we get there?
Yeah.
What can people do to become more informed and engaged and active citizens?
There are a lot of things people can do. You can start by staying informed about current events by reading reputable news sources and doing some fact-checking.
You can get involved in local community groups
Yes, absolutely. Get involved locally.
or political organizations.
Mhm.
Contact your elected officials. Let them know how you feel about the issues.
Right, make your voice heard.
And support organizations and candidates that align with your values.
Exactly.
Those are all great suggestions. But what about education?
Right.
Can't education help us foster critical thinking skills and civic engagement?
Absolutely. Education is crucial for shaping informed and engaged citizens.
Okay.
We need to equip young people with the skills and knowledge they need to thrive in this world that's constantly changing.
So it's not just about teaching them facts and figures.
Right. It's about so much more than that.
It's about teaching them how to think critically
Yes.
and to be engaged citizens.
It's about fostering this mindset of curiosity and critical thinking and civic engagement.
Okay, so now let's bring it back to the current political landscape. We can't ignore the influence of money and power in our political system. We've talked about billionaires like Elon Musk, the MAGA budget with its tax cuts for the wealthy, and all the concerns about conflicts of interest. How do we even begin to address all of this?
Well, I think we need to start by having an honest conversation about the role of money in politics.
Okay.
And consider reforms that limit the influence of special interests and give more power back to ordinary citizens.
Things like campaign finance reform.
Exactly. Things like campaign finance reform and transparency in lobbying and stricter ethics rules for elected officials.
Those are all really important things to think about. But what about individual responsibility?
Right.
What can we do as citizens?
Well, individual citizens have a really important role to play in holding people in power accountable.
Okay.
Stay informed about the issues. Contact your elected officials.
Right.
Make your voice heard. Support organizations and candidates that align with your values. Participate in protests and demonstrations. Use your voice in your vote.
It sounds like you're calling for a renewed commitment to civic engagement.
I am.
This recognition that our democracy needs us to be active participants.
Right. Not just those with wealth and influence.
Okay, so it's not enough to just sit back and watch.
Yeah.
We need to get involved.
Exactly. The strength of our democracy depends on having informed and engaged citizens. We can't just be passive observers. We have to participate in shaping the future.
That's a powerful message to keep in mind
It is.
as we continue to explore these really complex issues in
Yeah.
American politics. We've covered a lot of ground here, from
Yes.
Dogecoin to budget battles and unsettling behavior in Congress. What are your final thoughts on all of this?
I think what's most striking is this sense of urgency and the really high stakes that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
We're at this crucial moment in American history,
Mm.
and we're facing challenges that are really going to test our democracy.
Right.
But I also see some hope.
Okay.
More and more people are becoming aware of these challenges, and they're demanding change.
It's good to remember that we're not just watching this all happen. We can actually do something about it.
Exactly. We're not just spectators.
Or active participants.
We can shape the course of events.
We're going to continue exploring these themes in just a moment. But first, so we've spent all this time breaking down these events.
Mhm.
You know, the Doge Subcommittee, the MAGA budget, Elon Musk's influence. And you're saying it's not just a bunch of random things happening.
Right. It's not just random.
These are all signs of something much bigger going on in American politics.
Exactly. It's like a whole reshaping of power.
Okay, so this realignment, it sounds like a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Almost like we're on shaky ground.
Yeah, it is a big deal.
Can you explain a little more about what this realignment actually looks like?
Sure.
And what it means for everyday people?
Think of it like this.
Right.
We all know that traditional political spectrum.
Right.
You know that line from left to right.
Left to right.
But now imagine that line starts to warp and twist.
Mm.
It becomes three-dimensional.
Okay.
New lines are appearing.
New lines.
And technology and the wealth that comes with it, they're creating a whole new center of power.
Okay.
And this new center, it doesn't fit neatly into that old left-right way of thinking.
Right.
People like Elon Musk, they're operating in this new space.
Right.
They have influence that goes beyond the traditional ways we think about politics.
So this new power center, does it create opportunities?
Yeah.
Or is it more of a risk?
Well, it's both.
All right.
On the one hand, it could lead to some really innovative solutions to some very complex problems.
Right.
But on the other hand, it raises questions about accountability.
Yeah.
Are these new power players looking out for everyone's best interests?
It sounds like we're in a pretty confusing time.
Yeah, it is a time of a lot of change.
A lot of people probably feel overwhelmed by all of this.
Yeah, I can understand that.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to be informed
Right.
and engaged?
Well, first of all, remember that you matter.
Yeah.
Your voice matters, your actions matter.
Even when it feels like these huge forces are at play.
Even then,
Okay.
don't give in to apathy or cynicism.
So what should people do?
Think critically. Question the information you're getting, especially online.
Right, because not everything you read is true.
Exactly.
Okay.
Seek out different perspectives. Don't just stick with the people who agree with you.
Get outside that echo chamber.
Exactly. And most importantly, participate. Vote, contact your elected officials, support organizations that share your values.
Right.
These things might seem small,
Yeah.
but together they can make a real difference.
So you're saying that even though we might feel small,
Mhm.
we can still make an impact
Absolutely.
if we work together with other people who care about the same things?
Exactly. It's like each of us is a raindrop. One raindrop might not seem like much,
Great.
but when millions of them fall together,
Yeah.
they can carve canyons, they can reshape entire landscapes.
That's a pretty powerful image.
And it's the same with us. When we act together, even in small ways, we can overcome apathy and cynicism and create a better world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I want them to remember that they have power.
Yep.
They have the power to choose how they engage with the world.
Right.
They can choose to just passively absorb information.
Or they can be active and help shape the future.
Exactly. The choice is theirs.
That's a great message to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Doge billionaires and congressional showdowns.
It's been a pleasure.
Remember, knowledge is power, but only when you use it wisely. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay hopeful. The future is in our hands.